Hi, this is Ashlie Gazley, and I will be summarizing and evaluating the article, The Scaffolding of Emergent Literacy Skills in the Home Environment, a Case Study. Over the course of this presentation, I will talk about the purpose of the case study, the rationale behind the study, an overview of the study and data collected, advantages and limitations to this study, the quality of the study, and connections to classroom practice in a literacy setting. The purpose of this case study was to record the scaffolding methods used by a mother to enrich her son's early literacy skills and show how they were elicited by environmental print. Now I will discuss the rationale behind the study. The rationale of this study is to show the ways in which the interactions between parents and their children can encourage the development of emergent literacy skills. The strategies and examples shown in the study can provide both parents and teachers with engaging opportunities for literacy learning at home or in a classroom setting. Parents can play a crucial role in fostering learning opportunities that will impact their child's early literacy skills that develop before they enter kindergarten. The authors argue that while it's common for parents to read stories to their children, formal literacy teaching is more relevant in children's literacy acquisition, specifically in joint writing activities. However, this type of interaction is less common, and this study aims to give parents a simple literacy strategy to use at home. The participants in the study were a mother and her son, Harry. The mother observed and recorded notes on their interactions from age 2 to age 6. At age 6, his formal education began. Harry came from a middle-income family, and both parents had college degrees and professional occupations. The study found the family's socioeconomic status using the Hollingshead four-factor index. I wasn't familiar with this test, and after further research found that it is a survey designed to measure social status based on 4 domains: marital status, retired or employed status, educational attainment, and occupational prestige. Harry also displayed typical cognitive development and received no reading practice before the study began. Now I will give an overview of the case study. Harry's mom introduced him to print at the age of 2 using an environmental print approach. Environmental print allows children to attach oral words and symbols to objects. Some examples of environmental print are labels on food packaging, brand names on objects, text and labels on clothing, and written materials like shopping lists. Since environmental print tends to stay the same, for example, on stop signs and cereal box logos, print can be engaged repetitively and in a meaningful way. Thinking about this from a teacher's perspective, it's also a way to facilitate meaningful instruction in the classroom without having to spend money on materials. I know I've spent more than I probably should on my classroom, so it's nice to see ideas like these. Starting at the age of 2, Harry's mother began scaffolding opportunities for him to differentiate print from pictures and photos of environmental print. For example, when making Harry a chocolate milk drink using a chocolate powder product called Milo, the mother elicited this following interaction. The mother pointed to the print and said, "Look, that says Milo. Look at the for Milo. It goes up, down, while tracing the letter M with her fingers." Next, she asked Harry where the cup on the packaging was, and he responded by pointing to the cup and enthusiastically responding, "Cup." These types of interactions were repeated each day to strengthen Harry's print awareness as well as his motivation to explore letters further. Harry began to point out the environmental print, suggesting that he enjoyed these interactions with his mom. I like that the mother focused on the sound of the letter first rather than the name. This strategy is used in ABC Boot Camp in my classroom, and it claims to be more effective than teaching the names first. I'd be interested to do more research on this topic. Once Harry could tell the difference between environmental print and pictures, his mother began to focus more on individual letters within the print. These interactions were elicited by both Harry and his mother. The mother focused on capital letters since these tend to be easier than lowercase letters. This is the same scaffolding I use in my kindergarten classroom, and I also find that students learn uppercase letters at a much faster rate than lowercase. They just seem to be easier to identify. During this study, the mother used a multisensory approach that engaged Harry's visual, auditory, and kinesthetic senses. Here is an example of an interaction during this time. Harry's mother directs him to look at the print and states, "Look, Harry, it says milk," while pointing to the label, which activates his auditory sense. He is then encouraged to repeat a word, a letter within that word, followed by the sound it makes. So Harry's mother would say it first, and then he would repeat it. The mother also compared the sound to other words to build Harry's phonemic awareness. For example, M is also for mouse and moon. Harry's kinesthetic sense was activated by being asked to move his hand and arm in the shape of the letter to begin the connection of letters to writing. The mother also encouraged Harry to form letter shapes using modeling clay. And as a result, Harry began to self-initiate many letter-forming activities himself when eating or playing with household materials. Here we can take a look at the results of Harry's writing over the course of the study. Due to the study's qualitative nature, there weren't a lot of graphs or pictures or examples, so it was nice to have this one to look at. At 2.5 years old, controlled scribbling is the norm. Harry's mother scaffolded writing interactions by giving directional terms of up, down, across, or around. As seen in the picture to the right, this assisted Harry in producing scribbles that slightly represented simple letters. At age 3.5, these directional terms had resulted in Harry being able to independently write 7 simple letters that used up, down, around, or across movements. At age 4.5, Harry could write almost all of the letters of the alphabet on request. If he was unsure, the mother would assist once again using directional terms, first signing in the air with his mother before writing it himself on paper. Harry could write whole words and sentences using this scaffolding strategy, as you can see on the right. At 4.5 years, Harry's mother spelled out each of the words. It is important to note that Harry was not yet exhibiting independent phonetic spelling, meaning he wasn't sounding out the words. Again, for letters Harry didn't know, his mother would use directional terms. At age 5.5, Harry was showing evidence of independent writing of letter strings with no correspondence to real words. Harry also now formed the ideas for the text he wanted to write. At age 6, Harry now displayed evidence of phonetic writing, and as I say in my classroom, would hear a sound and write it down. The results of this study highlighted the important roles parents play in their child's early literacy skills when using this scaffolded approach. Environmental print was shown to be an effective tool to use during the process, and it proved to facilitate a motivating environment for preschool-age children to become aware of letters. The study also showed that a multisensory approach allowed Harry to avoid frustration during the learning process. He did not get frustrated during writing times because he knew his mother was there to scaffold the letter information. I liked this part of the discussion because this idea has been important to me during my teaching experience. It is important to find the balance between supporting students so they don't become too frustrated while also fostering an environment that encourages independence. The tools in this study were also shown to enhance kinesthetic memory of letter shapes and letter names and sounds. The use of directional terms for writing, as well as the physical formation of letter shapes, benefited Harry's writing skills. Even when independently writing at 6 years old, Harry could still sometimes be seen mouthing the directions of the letters as he wrote them. This study also showed that the scaffolding approach is an effective strategy for early literacy development. This is already widely known in the teaching world, and the mother's ability to break learning down into small, attainable chunks resulted in Harry being able to write more than he would have been able to without that support. The authors also reported that Harry reached developmental stages slightly earlier than the norm. However, the differences were not significant. Now I'll discuss some of the advantages of this case study. First, the use of one-on-one interactions between Harry and his mother provided in-depth descriptions of the interactions during the literacy instruction. It gave specific data rather than a broad overview of many participants. The second advantage was that the mother was able to observe over the course of 4 years. Since it was at home, these interactions weren't limited to a specific time of day. The third possible advantage that I saw was higher motivation to stay in the study based on the relationship between the participants. The mother seemed very dedicated to providing enriching literacy activities for her son. This might be different for other families if they did the same study, but this particular mother was very motivated. The last advantage I saw was the use of a qualitative approach. As I previously mentioned, the one-on-one relationship provided in-depth accounts during the study. These accounts were recorded in a conversational form, and this gave a good insight into the exact conversations that were taking place and how that affected the outcome. This case study design also posed limitations. The first limitation is that the one-on-one nature makes it hard to generalize. As the article stated, further evidence is needed to clarify the cause of the outcomes observed in the case study and determine what more generalizable or long-term benefits they might have for the literacy development in children. This might hold somebody back from using the strategies described in this study. The next limitation is that the relationship between the participants could lead to bias. It is up to the readers to trust in the observations and recordings of this mother about her son. One must also trust that the interactions happened exactly as the mother recorded them. On top of that, the study lacks any valid measurements of data, for instance, a standardized test or assessment. The next limitation I saw in this study is that it is reliant on the relationship of the parent and child. Recreating this study with a different family dynamic could result in findings that do not correlate with this study. The last limitation is the time it took to carry out the research. The commitment it takes to keep records and do instructional activities for 4 years could lead to attrition or a lack of fidelity in the method proposed. This case study was of decent quality and did an effective job at recording this child along with his interventions, observations, and findings over the span of 4 years. However, if this study was to be replicated, there are a few changes that I would suggest. First, there should be more participants and diversity amongst those participants. Having only one child in the case study left no room for comparison. I would do a multiple case study and choose 2 participants from a lower socioeconomic background and 2 participants from a middle class background. That way the 2 groups could be compared as well as the individuals within the same group. Finding this many participants that are able to carry out the study in the same way Harry and his mother did may be difficult based on the fact that it took 4 years. An alternative change that could help this issue would be to carry out the research in a preschool classroom. The teachers could use similar methods but in a classroom setting. This could be done in small groups. However, I would want to find an effective standardized assessment to implement. This would bring more validity to the study since it currently lacks any type of valid measurement. Having more participants in a classroom setting would also be beneficial for the possibility of attrition. Doing it in a preschool setting could also allow for a comparison with a control group. This control group could be in another classroom or between groups within the same classroom. This would give a good look into whether this method is more beneficial than other practices. I would also like to describe the data collection in a clearer manner. In order to understand the methods and the activities that were performed in the study, you have to read through the entire article. I would want to create a section that describes how the data was collected and analyzed. That way, readers could find it easier. This case study includes many important ideas that can be connected to classroom literacy practice. The first is the importance of parent involvement in their child's education. It was great to compare what I see in the classroom to compare to what this article deemed as developmentally appropriate for children at certain age levels. I first want to refer back to the article stating that Harry reached developmental stages only slightly before the norm, and by the time Harry reached kindergarten, he was using phonetic spelling. For the past 3 years, I've taught kindergarten in a Title I school in Middleton, and while some of the students come in with these skills, a much larger portion does not. Many of my students come in knowing little to no letter names and sounds, and some even without the ability to hold a pencil. So this study shows the importance of giving parents the resources to work with their children at home. While it would be nice if all parents had the time to do these types of activities at home, that's just really not the reality. This is why I think it's important to advocate for publicly funded preschool. While it would be difficult to pass in Idaho, the study is a good example of the difference quality preschool education can make in children's early literacy skills. The study could also be a potential method for both parents and teachers to support young children at risk of developing reading and writing difficulties. Exposing children to text at a young age can be very beneficial to their future literacy skills. It's possible that the students in my class that struggled with reading, based on the fact that they came in with no knowledge of print, could have had a different reading outcome if this strategy was used prior to starting kindergarten. Another part of this study that I really enjoyed was the multi-sensory approach. Using hand and arm movements to trace the letters in environmental print was very motivating for Harry. This is good to keep in mind for classroom practice. When students are engaged, they learn so much more and are given the drive to keep learning and exploring. The last connection I'll make to classroom practice is the benefit of scaffolding. If you're a teacher, you probably already know that this is a key component in helping students learn. This is very important in my daily instruction, especially in terms of literacy. For example, focusing on letter names and sounds, then how to blend them together to read CVC words, and during this process, connecting it to writing. If I asked students to copy words off the board on the first day of school, some would struggle holding a pencil, and others would struggle to find meaning behind the print that they had no experience with. And to me, this would be pretty meaningless instruction. That's why scaffolding is so important in literacy practice. The only reference that I used for this presentation was the article that I was evaluating. Thanks for listening to my presentation.